Hey guys, so I'm showing you guys the art I'm making. Oh, nice. Have a great couple of days, or until I see you again. I look forward to hearing how your ideas and art science projects are developing. It really feels like all the different threads are starting to weave together. Love, Yana. Cool. So let's need some money for food. Well, yeah. There's nothing to fear but fear in its source. Highlight the other side. Sometimes I like to turn it around here. I like this other side too here. Some JFK. God's work must truly be our own. JFK. I keep that up, right? Like that side. God bless. Homeless, please help. I've been there. We've all been there. But well, this is my little studio here, and to highlight this project, what I'm doing is making these paintings here. There's like 5 paintings that are going to be in a gallery where what I'm going to do is highlight toxic metals in pipelines. So these 2 pigments here, the red and the yellow. So this one, like the red and the yellow, and like the red, and the yellow here. That's cadmium. It's basically, sorry, not that one. So if you're just tuning in, this is the artwork for raising awareness for the metals in pipeline, both like when oils get out of the pipelines, like in like the Bemidji, Minnesota study that showed that arsenic gets out of a pipeline because its oil is being broken down by bacteria in the soil, and then that leaches the arsenic in the soil. But there's a lot of other things that are in these pipeline like oils, particularly like the tar sands oil has a lot of toxic heavy metals. So what this art exhibit will be is basically paintings with pigments that are from the metals that are found in the pipelines, or the toxic heavy metals of the pipelines. So this is cadmium. These are cadmium-based pigments, and these 2 are the red one, which is that one, is cadmium sulfoselenide. So it's cadmium, sulfur, and selenium, and it's red. So that's like this one here, and then I'm doing these like kind of, I don't know what they call this style, but like more pretty. I don't know, just drop the paint on there. But then I also have these ones like that. So I'm making these masks, trying to do that. And then this one is also cadmium. I was going to glue these on there. And then this one is cadmium sulfide. So that's the yellow. So what's interesting is to get kids, people to realize that same metal, different colors because of the ligand fields. This is sulfur ligands and this is sulfur selenium. And it changes the electronics of it. So it'll be, this exhibit will have a lot of chemistry education too, to explain, why the colors are the way they are. I think it's important to understand that. And, it's appealing, and then we could measure the spectrum with our phones. So the idea is to get people to, to engage with the art with their phones. And I'll share about that later. But the basic idea is just to make a bunch of paintings like this that are, kind of consistent with the overall idea of sharing about chemistry. So these 2 I added yesterday. I bought these 3 pigments yesterday. This is an ochre, yellow ochre, but it's actually iron oxide. So that's found in a lot of pipelines too. Like the one thing about the Bemidji study was that it was iron and arsenic. I've yet to find something with arsenic in it, but I'm getting there. But this is coming. I haven't painted with this yet. These 2 I did paint with a little bit. I haven't made one like this, but this is manganese violet, and manganese is another toxic metal that's found in like residues of well, let's just call it the black steak. It's a metaphor people are using in the movement. But this is manganese ammonium phosphate, and I made a solution of that here. Just put it up in water. And the idea is, I mean, you can put these pigments up in like oil, but I want to put it up in water because I like the idea of talking about water, how they're in water, you know, and to what degree they actually get soluble in water versus oil. So that's like another part of this exhibit, is talking about solubility and like the properties of the pigments. And so what I just did is I just, you know, poured it up there, and then I just poured in like poured it on there in these things. And then what I'm trying to do is like trying to see these things like that where they come together when you put a pigment together, like when they pour the orange and the red, or like red and yellow. I'm trying to layer, like I'm trying to do it in like layers. So, but the thing about this one is that this one's kind of turning out better because it's like you can see that there's green and orange, and then there's like, I think the contrast is just better in some reasons, but this one's not bad. I might just put black. I might put black in the places that are kind of brown, just to kind of cover it up. But I do have a black pigment over there, or blue, which I haven't even touched yet. So the idea is to cover up like all the white eventually, with like splotches and stuff. And then over here, I want to get single color like pictures painted, but I'm kind of experimenting. Like these are the sort of masterpieces in a way, but these are experiments about like style. I kind of like the idea of making like a mask or something. Didn't come out that perfect, but maybe eventually, you know, layering on like pigments and stuff, and I could flip it over. I don't know. I'll come up with something, but basically the gist of it is that we're getting more metals. Like this is chromium. That's chromium, and then this is manganese, and then this is the mixture of those two. So right now we've got chromium, manganese, cadmium, and then the next wave is going to be these pigments, and then I'm going to talk about something else too in a second. But this is iron. The next wave tomorrow is going to be iron, titanium. This is white. I don't really know what bone black is. Ivory black. Have to figure that out. This is aluminum and sulfur. Aluminum is actually another one that's really toxic. Believe it or not, that actually aluminum is bad too. So people don't realize that, but like aluminum is actually, you know, you use aluminum foil, but it's still actually not that good for you. And the other thing is that then there's this lithium. This is going to be the next step in a second, but I'll explain that later. Basically, this is on the way, and I want to share something next. So there was a thing that showed up the other day in the New York Times that was this one. Fish depression is not a joke. And so what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to use fish to look at the effect of metals on the brain, and to, in a public art exhibit, kind of highlight the effects of metals on the brain. And so what I want to share about is this exhibit that was done like by a woman up in, there's like a couple of the people in Israel that restart this. Let it restart. But basically that they showed that, I'll just read it out loud. You know, can a fish be depressed? The question has been floating around my head ever since I spent a night in a hotel across from an excruciatingly sad-looking Siamese fish. His name was Bruce Lee. According to a sign beneath his little bowl, they were trying to enjoy a complimentary Bloody Mary the last day of our honeymoon, and there was Bruce Lee, totally still, his lower fin grazing the clear faux rocks on the bottom of his home. When he did finally move, just slightly, I got the sense that he would prefer to be dead. The pleasant woman at the front of the desk assured me that he was well taken care of. Was I simply anthropomorphizing Bruce Lee and correctly assuming his lethargy was a sign of mental distress? When I sought the answers from the scientists, however, I assumed that they would find the question preposterous, but they actually did not. In fact, not at all. So, it turns out that not only can our guild friends become depressed, but some scientists consider the fish to be a promising animal model for developing antidepressants. New research, I would learn, has been radically shifting the way that the scientists are thinking about the fish cognition, building a case that pet and owner are not nearly as different as they may assume. And so then the Department of the Biological Environmental Science at Troy University in Alabama, where he was working to develop new medications to treat depression with the help of the tiny zebrafish. We tend to think of them as simple organisms, but actually, in a lot of ways, we don't give them credit. Dr. Pittman likes to work with the fish because, in part, they are so obvious about their depression. He can reliably test the effectiveness of antidepressants with something he calls the novel tank test. A zebrafish gets dropped in a new tank. If after 5 minutes it is hanging out in the lower half, it is depressed. If it is swimming in the top half, its usual inclination when exploring a new environment, then it is not. The severity of the depression, he says, can be measured by the quantity of time at the top versus the bottom, all of which seem to be confirm his suspicion about Bruce Lee, or the author's suspicion. All of this, of course, may sound fishy to anyone in 6 people who has experienced clinical depression. How can a striped minnow relate to what you've been through? Is depression the right word? While the scientists have used animals like mice to study emotional problems for decades, the relevance of those models to human experiences is sketchy at best. There's the obvious issue that we cannot ask an animal how they feel, says the Dr. Pizzagli of the Center for Depression, Anxiety, and Stress at Harvard Medical School. Though researchers may find parallels in serotonin and dopamine fluctuations, neither the fish nor the rat can actually capture the spectrum of depression as we know it, says Dr. Pizzagli. There is a heated debate in the fish research community about whether anxious or depressed is a more appropriate term. Regardless, in my opinion, I don't care. I think that there's trends. There's going to be certain things about behavior that are conserved, obviously that are elaborated in different species, but the basic things are kind of going to be the same. But what is convinced that Dr. Pittman and others over the past 10 years is watching the way the zebrafish lose interest in just about everything: food, toys, exploration, just like clinically depressed people. You can tell, says the Coleman Brown, a behavioral biologist at Macquarie University in Sydney, who has published more than 100 papers on fish cognition. Depressed people are withdrawn. The same is true for fish. The trigger for most domestic fish depression is likely lack of stimulation, said Victoria Braithwaite, a professor of fisheries and biology at Penn State, who studies fish intelligence and preferences. Study after study shows how fish are defying aquatic stereotypes. Some fish use tools, others recognize individual faces. One of the things we're finding that the fish are naturally curious and seek novel things out, says Dr. Braithwaite. In other words, your goldfish is probably bored. To help ward off depression, she urges introducing new objects to the tank or switching up the locations of the items, such as introducing a cat. We'll get to that later. Dr. Brown agrees, pointing to an experiment he conducted that showed that if you leave a fish in an enriched physically complex environment, meaning a lot of plants to nibble on and cages to swim through, it decreases the stress and increases brain growth. The problem with small tanks is not just the lack of space for exploration, but, said Dr. Brown, also the water quality tends to be unstable. and there may not be sufficient oxygen. So that's what we're going to get to with these things. What I'm going to do is test in art gallery and sort of a public art thing, trace amounts of metals that are not lethal. Obviously, I don't want to kill my fish. I mean, in fact, quite the opposite. I want them to sort of be, I don't know, stewards of this new world. But very small amounts of these metals, and actually see if there are statistically different patterns in that novel tank test. A lot of research has come out recently about how the heavy metals like cadmium, manganese, and this one is chromium, or things like arsenic, lead, aluminum. I need to get my hands on those, but basically they have an effect on IQ and learning and memory in children, and also things like there's a tendency for people to be actually more violent, unlike things like lead. And aside from everything else like arsenic, it actually has like a direct neurotoxic effect on behavior. And in a way, that's, to me, the most important thing to really recognize, is that if there's actually an immediate effect in, say, the 5 minutes of the introduction of the fish to that water that has the toxic metal in it, then that indicates that, to me, that there's an immediate effect if a human is exposed to a toxin from an oil pipeline leaking, or, say, a fracking well, or even like the mining issues to deal with what we're dealing with up in northern Minnesota with the boundary waters. And the idea is to highlight how these pigments, these paints, basically, it's the metal chemistry, not just in terms of like how the metals work in terms of a basic chemical perspective, but how they actually work in the brain. And so, furthermore, I think another piece of this art piece will be actually about music, and how sound and music and just how the brain perceives that. And like to what degree, if you actually sonically stimulate an animal or a person, will these phenotypes be enhanced? So maybe a baseline phenotype of like a toxic metal poisoned brain is fine, but under stress, it reveals its sort of true problems. So I have a speaker that I'm going to play music underwater and sort of, I don't know, play music to the fish of different kinds to sort of interrogate under stress what the effects of these metals are too. So there's lots of ways of doing phenotyping, and the main thing here is to highlight that, we want to show basically in an art gallery to people, or to ask the question. I mean, this is a hypothesis. Obviously, this is, I guess, the science part. We don't really know. But the vital thing is that, bringing people into the idea that, like, gently, that, these metals are toxic and they have a direct effect on behavior, that I think is sort of, people oftentimes miss that. So getting back to this, if you own a fish, you might want to consider what Dr. Brown, you might want to consider where he keeps his, an extensively landscaped 6-foot tank. He recommends a 2-foot tank with lots of plants and stuff for your average beta. The last time a guest posted Bruce Lee to Instagram, he was looking good and lively. Perhaps his new green leaf in his bowl had provided the enrichment. There's a green leaf right there. He craved, but then my heart sank. The internet produced photos of other Bruce Lees from the same hotel in several colors, red, blue, and purple fish. I wonder whether this monotony would eventually drive the replacement of Bruce Lee to hover immobile near his transparent tank. So, okay, that's important right now, and I'm going to leave it at that, but I'm going to introduce you to the other part of this, and obviously we have to show you the fish. Okay, so these are the These are the 4 tanks I got, and I need to pluck off the labels and stuff. But I got 4 of these for the tests. Again, that novel tank test. Probably use these for the novel tank test, and I'll probably get a larger tank for eventually for the fish themselves to live in, so that I could do what they're saying to keep them all happy and stuff. But regardless, yeah. And then this is the actual fish here. So these are zebrafish. I got 3 by 4, and I'm just letting him kind of chill out today and conditioning the water. In fact, what I should probably do is this. Probably, I don't remember this how this works. Past. So what you do normally is you condition the temperature that way. And I've done this before in the past, but you guys want to be careful with these guys. There. So what I'll do is the rest of the night, I'm just doing this like step by step, but the rest of the night I'm gonna let them incubate to let the temperature equilibrate between the bag and the tank. What I'm doing is conditioning the water, so that's like the key thing. Are there 3 of them in there? Oh, I see 2. Alright, well, you get the idea. Shit. And then I gotta take my light. Yeah, there are 3. There are 3 of them. So we're gonna let them go overnight, and they're gonna warm up or to like equilibrate to the water. And these are zebrafish, so you know that. And you could do this at home too. The novel home test, novel tank test. And yeah, we're just gonna see. First of all, just watch the tanks and stuff. See how they behave. Have to figure that out. I'm using this water conditioner, so I had to take out the chlorine. But mainly, I guess the important thing here is to make sure that everything is matched. I want to do that novel tank test that they do, but I want to make sure that I can like see trends in behavior first before I do anything else. And just see if these 4 tanks like have matching behaviors. And the other thing I want to show you is that Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Can never do science without coffee. Coffee is the most important part of science of all time. And considering this is art and science, we have to have lots of coffee. Because every good artist, every good coffee man, every good scientist, they're all the same. And the other thing might be like, do fish like coffee? I mean, we could just play this game over and over again. Does caffeine does caffeine affect the fish? You can see where this is going. Should be fun. So I did come out here for a reason. All right. So I'm going to put this right here. And that's a cool book, and I want to get to that in a second. But first, I want to clean this up, and I want to show you a couple things on the computer that relates to the fish and the metals in the form of paints. I mean, regardless how you present metals, they're all the same, chemically and biologically, physically. So, firstly, I want to say that this is a classic book from the late 70s, and essentially what it is, it's a book about consciousness. And put this over here. So I'm in a place in my life where I'm making a transition. We can put this up here, where basically I'm in transition in my life. I had gotten a PhD in chemistry from Berkeley in 2000, like graduated in 2009. But ended up, for a lot of reasons, pursuing a more spiritual path for like the last 8 years. And I ended up going to seminary, and I spent like 4 years working with youth, refugee youth, and like some stuff on the res in Pine Ridge, and also like taught school for a while. And sit down. So like the thing that really the thing that really came from that experience, so like the last 5 years of my life, in other words, what it came from that experience was a realization that people, or humans, particularly young humans, youth don't have as much choice as to how they experience school, as people that are involved in education would like you to think they can be. Largely, what I realized is that populations that are compromised socioeconomically by abuse and violence, by neglect, just poverty, racial trauma, gender trauma, ethnic trauma, religious trauma, like if you're Muslim or Jewish, you know, all of these factors like play into learning and memory. They play into how someone can focus in a classroom, or to what extent they can even at all read or do math or, you know, play music or whatever. So that's something that actually came out of that 5 years, is like seeing, you know, the environmental influences that children are exposed to, how that affects their behavior in school. Being a teacher, being a tutor, you know, I started out as a tutor at Clarkston High School after seminary for that 1 year, and just working one-on-one, you know, even things like doing essays about the trauma of being a refugee. You know, like I had a couple kids like write essays about, usually they began with like Holocaust, you know, because what it is like, this is the experience of the camps or the war. And, you know, it deeply affected me. And when I see all this crap right now about, you know, locking down borders and deportation, you know, the just blatant Islamophobic and anti-Semitic and, for God's sakes, just anti-human rhetoric that comes out of our own president and his advisors and Brett Barr and whatever. I mean, it's like it's the tip of a much larger pyramid. And, I mean, all that we know, but what do we do to address it? And I would say that basically this is one way. Stories about relationships. So this is a book that's come out from recently from Israel. It's a Persian Jewish woman who's Israeli. She's Dorit Rabinian, and it is an exceedingly beautiful book. It's a novel. It's called All the Rivers, and it's basically about an Israeli Jewish woman who meets a Palestinian artist, I think in New York, and like you can see, she put a little dedication in there, you know, love, whatever. But essentially, you know, it's about face-to-face, person-to-person, intimate love between a Palestinian Jew or a Palestinian Arab Muslim and an Israeli Jew woman, and it's exceedingly beautiful. I've just read like the first couple pages, but even just this poem itself, it says, "All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full, because all the rivers return to the rivers. Believe me, it is the secret of tidal flows. It is the secret of wistfulness." Avo Yeshurun. And I don't want to read any of it because I think it's just one of those things that you have to kind of like sit with a novel, you know. But I want to say this. This is like a really good way if you want to break through some of this junk culturally, conversationally, you know, cognitively and spiritually. It's about person-to-person direct contact. And the most intimate is like love through man and woman, or, you know, woman to woman, man to man, however that works. But, you know, intimate love, and how you learn the ins and outs of someone's mind, basically. I mean, I'm dealing with that in my life too, you know, that I'll just say that. But I think that that's important to realize, is that, you know, when you deal with someone in a classroom, right, you don't know what's going on at home. That's actually the number one thing right now. It's like when I was in that classroom in Atlanta, like in Langston Hughes High School teaching, I never knew what the fuck was going on at home, but I could tell something was wrong many times. And in a way, that's what's motivating this art is, like those many years of experiences with youth and seeing like the effects of the environmental influences, not only like parenting, but also just probably baseline level, like what's in the water, what's in the food, is this neighborhood safe? Is it loud? Is there gunshots in the neighborhood? Is it too noisy? Is it too much concrete? Is there green? Is there trees? I mean, all of that's going to have an effect on someone's brain and their ability to learn and retain information, the ability to function cognitively, and even more simply to be an emotionally functional being. I think actually that's even more important, much more important, orders of magnitude more important than cognition, like how the mind works, is how the heart works. And, if there's toxins in the environment, then there's a strong chance that they may affect, the emotions. And that's kind of what I'm after really here, is that I'd like to know, how, to what degree can fish be used to look at metals in behavior. And then I'm going to get to this in a second, but this is like another aspect of it, which is artificial intelligence. So basically in this book, they talk about, cognition and creativity. And, what's cool about it is that it's kind of it's kind of a weird book, but it has a lot about biology actually. So, it talks about, proteins and myoglobin and amino acids and ribosomes and music, levels of structure and meaning in proteins and music. So this is really pretty exciting actually, to me, because it relates all this shit together. And, the DNA and RNA and Gödel and mapping and the Gödel code and phage and the lifestyle of a phage. So, the brain, the brain is rational and may not be. Applying AI to mathematics. So, this is really, this is interesting. Mark that. So Arabic, grammar. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. Goes over there. And what I want to say is that we can go into the computer a little bit, but I'm going to be looking at this Israeli artist that I found recently. Goes over there. Get my coffee. So to recap this part of the video, let's finish this. But these are the ones that I've done so far. It's chromium, manganese, cadmium. These are the paintings, and I'll show the app that can measure the chemistry or the spectrum later. This is copper, aluminum, iron, and I'm on the way to get some arsenic and lead. But and the one that's really interesting to me is lithium. I hypothesize these will make the fish more excitable and maybe more violent, and that'll chill them out. But who knows? We'll see. And the last thing that I want to show you tonight, if I can get that over there, is oh, the other thing is that we're also working on sensors and interfaces with some of these sensors with like voice, and creating another kind of experience that's sort of part of this project, but I don't really want to get into too much. But the basic gist is that there are these little computers that you can make like sensors out of, and you can then detect things in the environment. So it's not just about showing people how these things work in an isolated setting, in like a controlled setting, like a gallery or a lab. It's about how does this stuff, come out in the environment and what's there, and showing people that actually they can measure it too. So that's a voice interface. So that's going to be part of this later. It's going to be a robot, but it's not later. That'll probably be part of the I'm thinking about doing some kind of theater project as well, and that's definitely going to be part of it. We may even have some VR in the exhibit, because I've got the things. A lot of this stuff is going to be how to stitch the things together, and what's kind of cool about this whole process, though, is that I think largely I'm learning to trust myself more as an artist, to just kind of go with the flow. And I don't know. So, I want to mention this firstly. We're oh, oops. Well, anyhow, okay. Let's get back to this. Sorry. So what I need to do is get access to this paper from okay. So this Leonardo is it's a journal of it's like an art journal, and it's pretty important. Okay, doesn't like that. Alright, that should work. Alright, here it is. I think there's some videos of this. Kind of funky. It's pretty badass. Let's see. Fish triggered music. So, I want to do this one more time. Syndrome.nu. Okay, so I guess that's the name of the artist. I don't know. It says syndrome.nu. Yeah, it's the same guy.
New word from National Security on the extreme disorder that appeared after the new feeding process. They have released information saying that the symptoms to watch for are a change in attitude, anxiety, gradual uncoordinated movements, trouble standing and walking ahead, and decreased milk production. Be advised that the only way to harm them is to shoot them in the head.
They say
New word from national security on the extreme disorder.
So these guys use max MSP. I think that's the key thing I have to like kind of learn. They're basically doing this stuff all in max MSP. So the thing is that this so go back here. So these guys are in Oxford, UK. This guy, and then they're, University of the Arts, Oxford, or in London. And then this fellow's in Israel. And then this one is in Israel, Hebrew University. So, what I guess I'm most interested in right now is in creating connections with these guys, because I think that what they've done in this project is to lay like the foundation for the work that I'm trying to do. Specifically, it's addressing the deeper issues about like I don't know, like trauma and music and sound and water, what's in the water. They created a technology for like how to monitor that with their motion tracking and stuff. And I'm trying to see download options PDF. Trying to download it. I'll download. It wants me to purchase it. Fuck that. I pay you fucking $15 for that. What I want to do is highlight the actual, like, how this thing works, and then I'm going to get into later, like, the biology more in other videos, but today I just want to highlight, like, what they actually do in the paper, how they technically do this, because I think it's actually important to do that first. And then once we know how, like, what they do and how it relates to what people do in academic biology, I think it could actually then support further interrogations of behavior that the public could actually participate in. And I think that's what's actually the most exciting thing about this, is that the strong potential for public engagement with like learning and memory research, basically, and how it could be done in a gallery. So essentially what they do is they map the motion of the fish using computer vision and trying to see. Essentially, they're using this thing that has like a a laptop and like a equipment with like a tank. They have obviously musical equipment, but the main thing that I'm interested in is just the software right now. They try to support their ideas. This is a journal, obviously, so they're, talking about the theory. But for me, this is the most important thing right now, the technology. So they use this jitter library, and then they're using max MSP jitter. So I'll read it out. Technology and performance. We developed a modular program using a max MSP jitter environment containing 3 patches that allow the use of 3 standard laptops, each equipped with a 2.4 gigahertz processor. And in this way, they smooth the motion of the visual effects and avoid DSP, or digital signal processing lag. Mainly, they're implementing the tracking and using computer vision from the jitter library. They use so they're using jitter. So what it is that those effects that you see in the video are coming from this basic software, and then the DJ is then using like this keyboard and like visualizations on top of the way the fish is being tracked. But the basic gist of it is that they're using this jitter, max MSP jitter, and I want to see what that is. So jitter patch inside max. Yeah. So it says they use this thing, cv.jit, blob tracking. Yeah, cv.jit. So that's what I want to learn. Mark that. Yeah. So that's mainly what they use. And curious.
Saddam Hussein must go. So far, of course, we do not know the fate of Saddam Hussein. Lots of rumors that he was injured in the first night of attacks. Just a little while ago, a senior official telling us they are still trying to figure out.